you like to get things done quicker, faster, and with less effort? So do I. So I created a Facebook group called Assistance, Automation, and AI for Mental Health Providers. You can search it in the Facebook search panel. And I created this because I love to talk about this topic. I love talking about assistants and how to hire them and manage them. I love automations that do things for me quicker, faster, better. And then AI is just exploding on the scene, and I feel like I'm talking about it all the time, and my friends are talking about it. So why not create a community group where we can discuss these things together, share ideas, and get things done quicker? I'd be humbled if you joined the group and started contributing your favorite tips and tricks on assistance, automation, and AI for mental health providers. Go to the show notes, find the link for the group, or just search up Assistance, Automation, and AI for Mental Health Providers in the Facebook search bar. We'll see you there. Welcome to the Scaling Therapy Practice. This is James Marlin with Dr. David Hall. This is the show where we help encourage you to take small steps towards big growth. Hello, David.
Hey, James.
Welcome back. Glad to have you here. This week, we're going to finish our conversation about the delegation framework. Last week, or the last episode, we talked about the decision-making framework, how virtual assistants make decisions. This week, we're going to help entrepreneurs and practice owners with the delegation framework. First, we're going to start out with our tool, tech, or tip of the week. David, why don't you go first?
My tip is particularly for those of you who are in group practice, whether you're the principal, you're just a part of one, thinking about how do you foster or create community within that group? And here's my simple tip, and this is what we do in my practice. We call it the hallway, and it's just simply a text thread. And we have certain rules, like whenever anyone joins the practice, we have a text thread going. Now, certain people could do it differently. People may have something in WhatsApp or Slack channel or something like that. But I think something like that is important. There's figuring out parameters for it, and the parameters are going to be different for different cultures of your practice. For us, it's we use it for both business and pleasure. For business, it is people looking for referrals for something, because at this point we've got well over a dozen people in our group. We're here at different times. We see each other once weekly, but sometimes someone will have an intake request that isn't a good fit for them based on age or availability or other parameters, and so they'll put something in the group thread. Sometimes it's practical, like we get locked out sometimes because our building automatically locks when you go in and out. And sometimes people will step out thinking that they had their keys and did not. And so it'll be the text thread, will someone let me in? But the other times it's jokes. And we'll have particularly one of our staff is the creator of the Instagram counseling memes. If you've not found them, it's an hilarious account, counseling_memes. At both the Instagram and Facebook, and he will experiment on different ideas he's thinking of posting. He'll send us GIFs or different memes he's created of therapist-related humor, and that will often brighten up our days. And so I just find it's a great community thing, and whatever you're doing, whether it's that or just thinking through what are the practical touch points of community that you're doing for yourself in your work as a mental health practitioner. That's one of the things that we do at Haven Counseling Center in Knoxville.
Cool. Yeah, that in the virtual world, and even in an office building where you can shut your door and you can't see anybody for weeks, it seems that those little things do make a big difference towards the connectivity. So thanks for that, David. My tip of the week is I've been listening to The Pumpkin Plan. It's the Mike Michalowicz book. About growing bigger businesses, and with the illustration of pumpkins. And the last chapter I listened to does a reframe when there's work to do. A lot of times when we get work to do, we ask, how is this going to get done? Like how am I going to see this client? How am I going to get this work done? And the reframe is, instead of, if you want to grow your business, instead of thinking how is this work is going to get done, you flip the question. You say, who is going to get the work done? It
Mm,
changes from how to who, and that way it takes you. Helps you think about delegation. It helps you think about prioritization. Helps you think about specialization. It's just a really interesting reframe, because as an entrepreneur, or as somebody who it does a lot of work, I think, like, how am I going to get, like, I automatically put in that I word. Like, how am I going to get this done,
mm.
instead of who's the best person or who's going to get this done.
So, and that's a good segue into the second part of our conversation on, kind of the delegation framework. So, this is your wheelhouse, James. So, you know, take us
Sure.
there.
Yeah, this is the second half of the decision making delegation framework. This comes from another Mike McCullough's program, actually, Run Like Clockwork. I took some courses from that, and the decision making framework. Was, you need permission, information, and confidence. So if I'm going to make a decision, we talked about this last
Mhm,
time. Like, if I'm going to make a decision, I need to have the permission to make the decision. It has to be within my roles. I need the right information to make it. And then I also need to be sure that I'm doing the right thing. I need to have
mhm,
confidence. And if I ever don't make those decisions, I know I can go to my boss or manager or whoever assigns the work and say, I'm missing this part of the equation. I'm missing permission. I don't have the passwords, or it's not in my job role. Somebody's asking me to do something different, or I don't have enough information. Do you want blue pens or black pens? We talked about that last time.
yeah,
So that I can go back to the person who assigned the task and say, I can't make this decision. I think I'm going to do this. Can you confirm, or can you give me feedback? And so that's a way to help train your assistant or the person that's delegating work, for them to be able to make more and more and bigger decisions as they learn and grow their confidence. So what is the responsibility for a practice owner, anybody delegating tasks? And it's similar in the fact that you have to give them permission to do it. Like, you have to define their role. You have to give them the right information. We talked about this last time. But the third thing, the differentiator, is the owner, the person assigning the work, has to give clear outcomes, or they have to define the outcome of what the task is.
mm.
Um,
No,
and
that's
it's
no,
Go ahead.
as I'm at the beginning phase of, as we're talking about, of investing resources for myself in VA support, this is a tricky one for me, James, because it's one of the things that honestly that creates the most hesitancy with me, because I'm unsure even of what it's going to like. My goal is for it to be better.
Mhm.
Fill in the blank for it. Of what I'm trying to solve. That, things are getting done in a more timely manner, that things are less disorganized. It's one of the things that frustrates me the most in being me, is
Mhm.
that I am not a naturally organized person, and I can manage that most of the time until I can't, and I get furious. I was trying to find something in my house this weekend, and when I'm trying to find something, I end up starting to clean because there are piles of things that it might be in. When I start cleaning, I get furious. And here's why. Because I will find things in those piles that should not have been in those piles. I found a tax form that should have been in a in a much more secure place than the pile I found it in my home office. And I am just getting progressively more mad at me. I have
Mhm.
no one else to blame but me. So when I think of the idea of support, of like, okay, I'll have less of this in my life, is one of the outcomes I'm thinking of. But the hard thing is it's hard for me to even think about the measurables of, what are the measurables? Because what I'm asking for in some ways is a feeling. And as a psychotherapist who worked with families and couples and things like that, That feeling as an end goal is completely unfair. For me to contract with somebody, to employ somebody that I'm wanting to accomplish some things for me, and I need measurable outcomes to know if it, because if I'm just going for a feeling, that's not fair to me and it's not fair to them. But
So
it's hard
let's
for you to imagine what that outcome could be sometimes when I'm so new to the task.
let's use that. That was like the end part of the conversation, but let's
Oh,
use that
okay.
because uh the there is going whenever you delegate things, you're either gonna feel great about it, like, oh, it happened exactly as I said, or there's gonna be some missed expectations. The difference between what you expect and reality, the gap is the disappointment. And so you use those you look for those feelings and you don't look for them to like blame people or to like get mad at them, but you use it as a starting point for the conversation. You use it as a part for like, I'm having this feeling, it's for a reason. What do we do for it? And
Mhm.
uh you have to realize it's gonna happen. But I guess that's point number one.
Mhm.
There will be there you will be disappointed with some things.
Mhm.
Now think about the virtual let's say you gave mm, you wouldn't give a virtual assistant the job of organizing the papers in your home office, but what if you gave him the job of organizing your files on your
Yeah,
computer?
it could be that that I've got my Google Drive that's in a
Yeah,
complete
they want your
mess,
Google
and
Drive's a mess and you want them to organize it.
uh-huh.
Now, most of the time, I think this is another thing to realize. Most of the time, like 95 to 99% of the time, the person you assign the task to wants to make you happy, right? Would you agree with that?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I would hope that that would be the yeah, absolutely.
It is not their goal to disappoint you. Like it's not their goal to screw up. It's not their goal to like be so bad that you get mad and you want to fire. They want to win. Like I think we have to recognize when we have disappointments, they're also disappointed too. Like they're like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I messed up and something went wrong."
Mhm.
And the reality for the mess up is often in the we didn't clearly give the outcome. That's the part where we had something in our head that we wanted. Let's say you wanted things organized just alphabetically, and they did it by date. But you
Yeah.
just said, "Organize my folders."
Mhm.
And they gave you something that was organized, but it wasn't the clear like, it didn't have the definition or the clarity of what you had in your head. And that's often as I was reading the book and as I, delegate a lot of things myself, I I know it's in my head, but I don't often communicate it with enough definition for the person on the other side to give me exactly what I want. And I have
Mm.
to recognize that's me, right? I mean, I'm a big part of the failure. If I want the job done and the person wants to make me happy and then they give me something that is below my expectations, is it because, they're a lazy, no good worker?
Not likely. No, it is the so what's the solution?
Well, uh there's a couple things you can do, and it's not difficult, but like the for the first part is be clear. Like clarity is defining the task that you want the assistant to do, and this means giving them some of the details, like what does the finished product look like? Like what is the time frame? What are the resources required? Uh, you make sure that you define it very well for them. You also said something in the beginning, like you need metrics, right? I think metrics are important for virtual assistants or anybody that you delegate the task to. Uh, I you might not have a money goal, but you might have a time goal. Like, I need this done in, a successful person to do this will have this task completed in this amount of time.
Well, and
Uh,
to go on a detour in this that feels
that's
relevant
fine.
about metrics. As a general rule, I find a lot of therapists aren't good at that. We're generally feelers.
Yeah.
And I know I don't want to speak in absolutes because of course there's a whole variety of individuals, but as a strong predilection for a lot of people in the industry, we're a feeling type. We're very
Hmm.
intuitive. If we're good at our jobs, we're often very intuitive. But what that practically means is we don't incline towards the measurable, objective standards, and it's a discipline we have to engage in. Because to your point, like, you talk about the gap between disappointment and delight. Delight happens with either like what I exactly imagined was accomplished, or sometimes it's even like this person surpassed my expectations. I was expecting something, and that's even better. And then it's not quite what I expected. And it may be when I experience that disappointment, sometimes it could be there could be the realization that, as you said, like I said, organize these files. I, in my mind, was thinking alphabetically. They did it chronologically. I did not specify that. And there's this realization there was a gap in the information that I gave. And that
Hmm.
goes to some previous principles that you said. What's even harder is sometimes I have the sense, or it can happen if I just don't like this, but I can't even put words to why I'm disappointed because it's just, I didn't define it beforehand for myself or anybody else. And I would say, as a touchy-feely sort of therapist person, if you're listening to this or watching this and that's you, that is on you. That is not the other the VA's issue to fix. That is your
Yeah.
issue to fix. And time to, you know, to step up to that. Now, is it gonna be easy? And if I was in that situation, I would just try to prime the conversation with whoever I'm working with to say like, "Hey, this is new for me, and I don't even know everything I'm asking for." And that's a different sort of permission giving, is giving them permission to guide me. Like, what would be helpful information that I haven't given you? If I've laid out a task, what are the gaps in my instructions? And to be proactive in asking for that, because I think that would be one way, as I'm imagining doing this in this conversation, is I want to be proactive in giving them permission to say, versus I give them a task and they may have a sense early on, like, well, does he want me to do this alphabetically or chronologically or
Well, one way to prevent somebody working, 10 hours on something in the wrong direction is to have an early check-in. That's a big tip.
mm,
Like, give them an hour or do one, organize one folder and send me the results, and then we'll give you some feedback. So an early check-in with feedback is a tool or a technique to confirm that they have the outcome that you want. The uh, the example in the book, I think it's the Clockwork Book, is you assign somebody to cook some food or bring you something to cook food, and they bring you sticks, and you want it in oven. You know,
mm,
like they. But if you checked with them, in the first 15 minutes, and they're picking up sticks, you can be like, "Whoa, no, no, go to Walmart. Here's the credit card and buy me an oven." So, that's just one of those things to prevent some of those big time disappointments, like the gut check, like, "Ugh, I really should have checked in with somebody." I mean, an example I had a virtual assistant that was working on, insurance claims for somebody, for one of the clients, and you're a cash pay business, aren't you? Are you?
credit card, but if you mean like
Credit,
versus
credit,
if
yeah,
you
yeah,
mean versus insurance based,
insurance
yes,
based.
I do. Yes, we're a cash based practice.
Okay, so they had claims errors, and you've probably heard stories though, but you can be on the phone if you're calling them up. You can be on the phone on hold for 15, 20 minutes
Hmm.
waiting for, or longer, depending on the company.
Hmm.
And so this person was a virtual assistant, and she worked very hard at calling the company when she had time, but she also didn't have an hour to wait on the phone because she was jumping in between tasks. So she
Mm,
would call, wait for 15 minutes, didn't get a response, mark down her time, and move on. And by the end of the month, she worked 20 hours on calls and solved like 2 problems. She
mm,
didn't understand the outcome. She was doing her job. And that was the big gut check for us, is she didn't understand the outcome. Like, the outcome wasn't making calls. In
mm,
fact, the outcome when a call comes in, if you have a receptionist, most of the time the outcome isn't answering the phone. The outcome is like scheduling,
mm,
getting the right people at the right time to the right therapist for the right reasons. Like, that's the reason for um hiring somebody in person to do those things. You want a filled schedule. If they fill a schedule and they're nice and polite, and everybody has a good experience, that's a bonus too. Like, you want people to have a good, that might not even be a non-negotiable. You want people to feel good about your services. So you have 2 outcomes. You want people to feel good about calling your services, and you want the schedules filled. So how do you do that? Like,
mm,
it's you don't make answering the phone on the second ring the main thing, because then they'll drop other tasks to do this one thing that might that might not be the outcome that you actually really, 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 really want.
mhm. No,
So
that's
early
good, and
check
it's
that
the
we were talking about disappointments and
well, what you're describing makes me think of there's the proverb, "Missing the forest for the trees,"
mm,
and that we can be thinking about the individual pieces versus the whole of what it is. In psychology, there's the term in this of the Gestalt, which is a great German word. Like there are lots of things in the history of modern psychology, but it's this idea of it's not the individual pieces, is how it comes off as a whole. And the Gestalt of the thing is more going to be representative of the outcome versus the individual pieces. I don't want a collection of trees, I want a forest.
mhm,
And when you ask what's the difference, it's some of what you're describing. Like if you make it a tree is answer the phone on the second ring
yeah,
versus I'm trying to create an experience for the client or the potential client. That's the forest. And I think that's a good pivot in the other side because my challenge to my fellow therapist is we're often not very good at metrics. However, what we're describing, I do think will feel more naturally understandable and intuitively taken in because we are typically much more about kind of the bigger picture. A lot of us are much more in Myers-Briggs terms, we skew more towards the intuitive, the in versus the sensing S. Not all, and I think, again, I don't want to put people in boxes and exclude them and be like, well, if you're if you're a therapist that's good at metrics and more of a sensing person than Myers-Briggs, then you're an outline therapist. I'm anecdotally speaking of my experiences and definitely describing myself and people I find that I work directly with, but lean on your strengths, which is thinking about what is the experiential outcome that I want them to have. And I
yeah,
talk about this if you supervise or you teach other therapists, I think this is a big thing of oftentimes inexperienced therapists will want like, well, what do I do exactly in this situation? And what's the classic therapist answer? Do you know what it is, James?
um,
If you ask a therapist a question, particularly if it's a yes or no question, what's the classic therapist answer?
well, it depends.
Yes, it depends. Because there's almost never an absolute binary in the
Yeah,
situation. So I
yeah,
was talking with a supervisee just yesterday about how confrontational she should be in a particular situation. And we were talking about this particular situation. And then she asked further as a clarifying question. It's like, so this is what I should do in these situations. I'm like, oh, it depends. we were assessing this particular client and this relationship and this client's personality style of how confronting them in this way would be taken versus comparing that. And I use that opportunity to compare to another one of her active cases. And like, this wouldn't work out in the same way. The goal is not the method. The goal is the outcome. The outcome
Yeah.
was we wanted to facilitate positive therapeutic change while maintaining or even increasing therapeutic rapport and alliance. We want the clients to move in the direction that they're asking for therapy to be about. And in that process, for them to feel good and to trust you and the relationship more. That's the outcome. How we do that is as different as people are different. There's certain clients that I'm very confrontational with because that's how they trust me. They trust me that I'm not going to sugarcoat things for them
Hmm.
and that I'm going to be really direct. For other clients, that could be kind of bruising and hurtful. And I've got to be softer with them because they're different. I still want the same outcome. I want them to trust me and to experience positive change. The method is not completely unimportant, but it's very subordinate to the outcome.
Hmm.
That's my therapist paradigm and language for what I'm hearing you kind of talk about, James.
And that's also a way to, when you're delegating things to a virtual assistant, that sort of philosophy keeps you from micromanaging. If
Yeah.
you're like, I really care about this outcome, and after a little bit of testing, you've proven you can make great decisions. I'm just gonna be checking in at these times. Like, you trust but verify. I guess that's one
Mhm.
of the tips from Jim Collins, Good to Great. Like, trust when you're delegating things, and you trust that people wanna win, that they wanna do it, but it's also up to you to verify that things are getting done in the
Mhm.
right way. In the beginning, you have more frequent check-ins. As they pr you know, are proven, you have less frequent check-ins, but you can't give up the check-ins either. Like, you still have to verify that things are getting done.
Yeah.
The 2 other kind of, like, delegating tips is delegate to one person. I don't know if you've ever delegated to the room, "Hey, can somebody help me with this?" Or, "Can
Yeah, it's the
somebody"
worst
it
because
it's
no
ex
one owns it. No one owns it, and it becomes
yeah.
like, "Well, I thought you had this. I thought you had this." Like, yeah.
Uh, you're
No,
killing me by just saying those things, because I've delegated to the room before, and then I get mad, like, "Why isn't
yeah.
anybody helping? Doesn't anybody care?" Because I was a bad delegator.
It is. Well, it becomes you're opening yourself up to resentment,
Ugh.
and also just the thing not getting accomplished. And so getting very specific, and I could say this too in the context of a co-business owner. Now, my business partner is also my life partner, and so that's a whole different, I don't know if that's episodes in us, James, but what is it to work with your spouse and kind of all and kind of boundary sorts of things? 'Cause I've got plenty of things I've learned over the years in that. And I will say, not to brag, a lot of this, I'll give my wife credit for this because she's pretty awesome. But we generally do fairly well in our roles, but part of what does that is she and I, from the very beginning of running a business together, were very overt in who was responsible for what. Now, responsible for something doesn't mean that that person is the sole laborer in that thing, but is so in our counseling business, here's probably the best way to describe the gestalt, like the general feel of it, is I am in the business, I am much more the kind of external relations sort of person. I'm the Secretary of State. I have the lead in a lot more marketing, but also recruitment. Like when we're looking for new therapists, I'm the person that will do the initial interview with somebody before we bring them in, and my wife and I will interview a candidate together. But I'll do the initial more informal conversation with somebody to see if they even get to that. So I'm the one doing marketing events. When we've run ads, I'll do that. I'm kind of the external person in. And I'm probably more of the big picture person of like, this is where I'm thinking we're going as a practice. My wife is much more of the internal management sort of person. She's our onboarding person. When we hire a therapist, once a therapist is hired, I have a lot more work with the therapist before they're hired. But once they're hired, it shifts a lot more into her. She's the onboarding person. She's the one that trains them in the HR. She's the one that uh takes their picture for the website, but I manage the website. I'm the one that manages the website and makes updates and corrections and things like that. So all that said, we have clear roles, but we are free to ask. She'll ask me to do things that are more in her domain just because she needs help. And she is free to do that. But there's a difference between her seeking out aid versus the responsibility hasn't come on me. Ultimately, the fact that this new therapist is up on our EHR, it's her thing. She may ask me to say, "Hey, could you show them this because I'm busy?" So she'll delegate the things that she's delegated to, which is fine. And vice versa for me. My wife knows how to update the website. And there are times where I've just been less available. I'm like, "Hey, there's this typo,
Yeah.
will you fix that?" So anyway, but you need to have the clear delegation, because if it's just, "Hey, will somebody do this?" It's either no one will do it, which is more common, or multiple people will try to do it and they'll get in each other's way, depending on what it is.
You had the key word there, ownership. Like,
Yeah.
ownership is when somebody's responsible and they own it, it gets done, and it gets done better than if a group of people own it or nobody owns it. Like, even
One
if
more
you delegate to a group, somebody's got to be responsible in that group
yeah.
for being the person who makes sure it gets done.
And one more thing on that, on ownership. Ownership also means kind of fessing up when you haven't stepped up like you should. And it doesn't need to be a shame-based thing. And I think that's something a lot of people need to get over or need to push in themselves. But for an example, I had this last week. I'm on a volunteer board. We meet about once a month, but we're a working board where we have tasks that we're trying to complete for this nonprofit organization. And there was something that I was supposed to do that I didn't do. It wasn't just I forgot about it. It was just like time got away from me. I missed a meeting with somebody, and I was giving my report to the board, and I start off with that. I'm like, "Hey, this was my task, but the last board meeting, this was my task. I did not do it. I will I gave reasons, not excuses, is something I always kind of say. I don't wanna make excuses, but, like, I did give context, like, this wasn't I didn't forget, or this wasn't like, here were these other things that happened. I acknowledge that could be hardship for people. I'm affirming that I will prioritize it for the next cycle, and I plan to. And it wasn't no one was particularly mad, but part of ownership is the fact of even owning when it doesn't get done.
Yeah.
And I may have come up with a different solution. I may have approached the task and realized that my capacity or skill set meant that I couldn't complete the task. And then ownership in that means I go back in the VA example. Let's say I'm a VA and I get assigned to do something. I have responsibility going back to my employer or contractor to say, "Hey, I can't do this. I thought I could, or I don't want to disappoint you, but." That's a different form of ownership, is even kind of owning your own lack of capacity. But that's all information. If I hire a VA and they say they can do Google Ads, or they're willing to learn Google Ads, and they try it and they suck at it, what I want them to tell me is that very thing. Like, "Hey, I thought I could handle this and I can't. You probably need to find somebody else." If I hire somebody or contract with somebody that does that, I'll be honest, I don't think I'll be that mad. I'll be impressed that they don't it. So ownership isn't even just ownership in success. Sometimes it's ownership in failure, but both are
Yeah, and
important.
when they tell you those things, when I was working with VAs, it's often like, okay, well, what can you do? Well, I can do
Yeah.
like 75% of it. It says 25% I don't know. Oh, great. Well, now we fix it. But when they hide the problem, that's
Mhm.
they lose trust. And when you lose trust, you lose everything. Like, if you hire a virtual assistant and you don't trust them, that's the final tip. Hire slow, fire fast. Like, when
Mhm.
you lose trust with them, because not because they're trying and they made a mistake, you don't fire, or you're disappointed, but there's like hidden things and they're not but revealing things to you. That's something to think. Like, if I don't trust them, that means I'm going to pull back on delegating to them, and the growth is going to be slower, and it's going to take longer, and I'm gonna be, like, looking over their shoulder, and guess what? People don't like being looked over their shoulder, but then you feel like you have to because of the lack of trust. Once trust was lost, the relationship was eroded, and you either put a lot of work into rebuilding the trust, or you switch assistants, or they would choose to leave the company.
Mhm,
Just you once you lose trust, it's over. You just
mhm,
can't. It's hard to recover.
mhm,
Um, Couple other tips on clarity with well, one more thing on delegation. The last step in delegation is reporting. Always,
mhm,
always. The last thing whenever you have like this is the process of doing the task. The last step is tell or record or report that it is done, because the person who assigned it to you is going to worry, is it done, until you tell them it is done.
mhm,
And so the task for them doesn't stop when you finish it. It stops when they know it's done.
mm,
And that's just closing the loop, because the owner is going to wake up in the middle of the night going, "Did this get done? And do I have to do damage control?" Where
mm,
the VA is like, they did it 3 days ago, but they forgot to record on their sheet. I don't know how many times. One of the simple tasks we had was a call log. People called in, they recorded the calls, uh, and then they did if somebody sent an email, or they like reported on what was done with the client, the communication follow up, and then closed it out. But if the virtual assistant didn't close it out, or they forgot to record on the call log, then the owner was like, "Oh, nothing got done for 3 days," and they like get really anxious. Like, nobody's handling these calls, and these people are waiting, even though the work was done. It's just the virtual assistant didn't record. They didn't follow the policy of the
mm,
last step of telling them it's done. Like, it's taken care of. You can like get it out of your brain. It's done for you. So, anyways, like I always try to, when I work with a virtual assistant, have a way for them to tell you it's done. Like,
mm,
it could be a Trello board, check the box. I do a lot of podcast publishing. I publish a couple podcasts. I always tell them it's done. It's ready. It's in the can. It's scheduled to be posted, because then they can start worrying about, the next thing.
mm,
The social media posts are done. These are done. Like, I do tasks for people, and I just tell them it's done so they can stop worrying about it.
mhm, mhm.
Uh,
Great.
And just to wrap up, things to help you with clarity: use visuals. Like, if you have pictures or screenshots, I love standard operating procedures that are done in video. So a lot of times with a virtual assistant, you can, if you're doing all the scheduling for yourself right now, start recording some Loom videos, put them in a folder, and then when you delegate them to a virtual assistant, have them look at your Loom video and write out their own standard operating procedure, and now they own the process. So use those visual aids, use those videos, and then one of the big things we did for our clients was check-in meetings. Just like
Mhm,
we call them success meetings. I now that I have to come up with the name, we call them. They just checked in with their client on a weekly basis, and they also gave emails at the end of the week. This is what I did. This is where I'm at with my projects.
mm,
That way, the owner knew what was going on. They knew what the priorities were. They knew they were working, and they could give feedback. Oh, you can you can stop working off the project. You can, I know we had these insurance claims, but I want you to call these scheduling people. Like, they could rearrange the time that they had to use, because we over communicated. We found that when we over communicated, we had less problems.
makes sense. Makes sense.
All right.
Uh,
That's pretty much all I have. I do think using well, what's one thing you want people to remember from this episode, David?
Outcomes. It's about the outcomes. Don't get lost about talking about the trees. And so think about, and you've got it. So, and I guess, I don't know, we haven't articulated this in this way, but think of the end and work backwards.
Mm,
And it's similar to what I as a solution-oriented leaning therapist, I don't want to talk about the problem that my clients are coming in with, or I don't want that to be the focus. I want it to be, what is the solution? What is the positive possible outcome for it? How do we work backwards from that? Because to say I want somebody to answer my emails is a tree. The forest is, I want my communication to be prompt, and I want the people that are reaching out to me to feel attended to and cared for, and that their questions are answered.
Yeah, like the past doesn't matter. You want the outcome.
Yeah.
Like you want them to go forward. That's Manager Tools has a feedback model where they say it's just a simple phrase, um, where it tells them, hey, when you do this, this happens. Can you do something different? And that's all it is. It's just quick phrase, but it focuses not on the mistake. It focuses on the future behavior. And you just said that really well. My one thing is just use the disappointment and those feelings as a discussion starter. Like it's
Mm.
not the end of the world. It's actually to be expected until you get into a rhythm, until you get the standards established and how things go, there's going to be some disappointment. So don't ignore it. That's another thing that owners would do. They'd be like, "Oh, it's gonna get better," or, "Oh," you're laughing.
Yeah.
"Oh, this is gonna get better. I hope they're gonna pick up on my nonverbal cues or my like,
Yeah, they'll know that I'm passive
feel
aggressively angry and make the corrections I want.
oh, well, I don't know." And then what happened in those situations is the problem would go on for like 2 months, and then the trust is broken. Not because the assistant was doing anything wrong. They didn't know they were doing anything wrong. They either missed a step and they just kept doing the wrong step because nobody checked in. It all kind of works together. So when you feel the disappointment, that's good because that clues you in on what is missing. That helps you understand, I need to have a conversation about this because it's bothering me. As you said, David, you're like, I'm not even sure why this bothers me. It's just not right. I got to talk about it. And then you focus on the outcome. Like, what do we do to make this not the mistakes and how bad people are, but like, oh, I want this. Let's talk about it. And you will never get there if you don't listen to your disappointment. You have to listen to it to start those conversations.
Mhm.
There you go.
Absolutely.
So, you want to wrap up? I'll wrap up.
Go for it, James.
Thanks everyone for listening to the Scaling Therapy Practice. I hope you learned a little bit about delegation and setting up outcomes and listening to your internal dialogue. I really enjoyed the conversations we had, and I hope you like and share the episode with your friends. This is James Marland with Dr. David Hall for the Scaling Therapy Practice. We'll see you next time.
Later. Psych Maven is proud to support the Scaling Therapy Practice podcast. And if you are someone looking for ideas that are tailored to your own personal style on how to scale and grow your own impact and income as a mental health provider, we hope you might check out our free online assessment. If you go to stp.psychmaven.com, you can take our free personal inventory and find out what your builder type is as a helping professional. This assessment is quick and fun, and it comes with tons of customized resources with your results, so you can discover the best ways to scale that match your own personality. Find the assessment at stp.psychmaven.com. That is stp.psychmaven.com. Have fun with it.
Thank you for listening to the Scaling Therapy Practice. I hope you enjoyed the show. I want to remind you that the content shared today is for general information and entertainment purposes only. It shouldn't be considered as legal or tax advice. If you need a professional advice in those areas, please consult with a licensed attorney or accountant. But thank you so much for listening. The Scaling Therapy Practice is part of the SciCraft Network.